My friends set me up on a prank date. Then I met her, and everything changed. The Lone Wolf Gets Volunteered. October 18th, 2016, Duluth, Minnesota. The wind came off Lake Superior like it had teeth. It shoved wet leaves across the parking lot in thin, frantic lines, the kind that looked alive if you caught them out of the corner of your eye. I had one hand on my truck door and the other on my coffee, trying not to let either one slip, when I heard my name shouted over the gusts. Not called, yanked. "Harley, don't you dare get back in that rust bucket!" I froze with the door half open. My brother's voice had always carried. Same tone he used when we were kids and he wanted to sound older than he was. I didn't look up right away. I watched my coffee ripple, watched the surface shake like it was nervous too. I shut the door anyway. Mark and Jonah came jogging across the lot from the brewery entrance, both of them in hoodies that were too thin for this weather, grinning like men who'd never had to swallow consequences. "Just come inside," Jonah said, breath puffing white. 5 minutes." 5 minutes turns into 2 hours, I said. "I've got stuff to do." Mark stepped in close enough that I could smell his cologne fighting the lake air. "We know, that's the problem." That was how they framed it, like my life, quiet, steady, uneventful, was some kind of defect they were obligated to fix. Inside, the brewery was warm and loud, all wood and copper, and the sweet, bready smell of something fermenting. The windows fogged from bodies and beer. People laughed too hard, like they needed the noise to prove they were happy. They steered me toward a table in the back before I could decide to leave. "You've been living like a monk," Jonah said, sliding a pint across to me like it was medicine. "I've been living like a person who enjoys peace," I said. Mark leaned his elbows on the table. "You enjoy being alone." "Not the same thing." He gave me this look, half pity, half challenge. "You don't even date." I didn't answer. There were a lot of things I didn't do anymore. I didn't go to town events. I didn't sit at bars where people asked questions. I didn't talk about the year everything cracked open, and I learned what loyalty cost in a small place. Instead, I built things, cabinets, shelves, porch steps for people who couldn't do it themselves. I worked, I went home, I kept my circle tight. That wasn't loneliness, that was survival with the volume turned down. Jonah clapped his hands once. "Okay, so here's the deal." "No," I said immediately. "We haven't said it yet." "You don't need to," I said. "That tone means you did something dumb and you want me to carry part of it." Mark's grin widened. "It's not dumb, it's corrective." "Corrective," I repeated, like the word tasted bad. Jonah pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward me. A profile picture. A woman standing near a lake. Dark hair, simple smile, no heavy makeup, no pose that screamed for attention. She looked normal, real, like someone who'd rather be outside than in a room full of strangers. My chest tightened in a way I didn't ask for. "Her name's Elise," Jonah said. "She's visiting her sister up here for a few weeks. And before you start, no, she's not a scam, and no, she's not crazy." Mark lifted his hands. "We're setting you up." I said no, I told them. "You always say no," Jonah said. "That's why we're not asking." I stared at the picture again. Elise. She had soft eyes, but not weak ones, the kind that had seen something and decided to keep living anyway. Mark cleared his throat. "It's just coffee at Loon's cabin, Saturday, 2 p.m. I let out a slow breath. "Why are you both acting like this is a charity event?" Jonah's smile slipped for a second, just enough to show something underneath. "Because you're our friend, and you're shrinking." I hated that it landed, not because it was cruel, because it was true in a way I didn't want to name. Mark reached across the table and tapped the screen. "We're already told her you'd be there." I looked up, sharp. "You what?" "She thinks you're a friend of ours," Jonah said quickly. "Which you are. Relax." My jaw tightened until it ached. "This is a prank," Mark scoffed. "No, it's a corrective." "Corrective," I repeated, like the word tasted bad. Jonah leaned in, voice low. "Harley, she's not in on anything. If you don't want it, you can walk. But at least show up. Don't make us look like idiots." Mark chuckled. "That ship sailed years ago." I stared down at my beer and watched the foam settle. The noise around us blurred into a steady roar. In my head, I saw my cabin in the woods, simple, quiet, safe. I saw how the lake looked in late fall when the trees burned gold and the water went steel gray. I saw how easy it was to live with nobody expecting anything from me. Then I saw Elise's eyes, and I heard Jonah's word again, shrinking. I hated them both for knowing me that well. "Saturday," I said finally, voice flat. 2 p.m., coffee, 1 hour. Mark slapped the table like he'd won something. "Yes!" Jonah exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. "Thank you." I pointed at them, slow and deliberate. "If this is a joke, if I walk in there and there's a camera, or her friends jump out, or you two are hiding behind a plant—" "Harley," Jonah said, almost offended, "we're not 12. Mark grinned. "We're at least 14. I stood, pulling my jacket tighter. 1 hour, I repeated, and if it smells like a setup, I'm gone. Outside, the wind hit me again, cold and relentless. I climbed into my truck and sat there for a moment with both hands on the wheel, staring through the windshield at the gray sky. I told myself I was doing it to keep the peace, but deep down, I knew the truth. I was doing it because a small part of me still hoped the world could surprise me in a way that didn't hurt.
Saturday came colder than it had any right to. The kind of cold that seeped through denim and made tools feel heavier in your hands. I spent the morning in my workshop, radio off, just the rasp of sandpaper and the dull knock of wood against wood. Busy hands kept the mind from wandering. I told myself that over and over as I worked a cabinet door that didn't need fixing. The grain ran straight, no warping, no reason to redo it except avoidance. Every few minutes my eyes drifted to the clock nailed above the workbench. 12:47. Too early to leave, too late to forget. I shut the sander off and let the silence settle. Dust floated in the sunlight cutting through the high window, slow and patient. The workshop smelled like pine and oil, familiar and steady. Nothing here asked questions, nothing surprised me. That was the problem. I wiped my hands on a rag and leaned back against the bench. The quiet pressed in, heavier than the noise ever was. I thought about the cafe, warm, crowded, unpredictable. I imagined walking in and seeing her already seated, checking her phone, wondering if she'd been stood up. I didn't like that picture. I also didn't like the dozen worst ones my brain offered up. Hidden laughter, awkward pity, the look people gave when they realized you didn't quite fit the shape they expected. I locked the shop anyway. The drive to my cabin took longer than usual, not because of traffic, but because I kept slowing down without realizing it. The road wound through trees stripped thin by fall, branches bare and reaching. The lake flashed between them in cold silver breaks. The cabin waited where it always did, squat, solid, unremarkable. No porch swing, no decorations, just wood, stone, and a roof that didn't leak. Inside, the air was cool and still. I set my jacket on the chair and stood there, listening to nothing. This place had held me together when everything else went sideways. It had asked nothing except that I show up and take care of it. I splashed water on my face, studying myself in the mirror above the sink. A few more lines than I remembered. Hair touched with gray I hadn't earned gently. Eyes that had learned caution the hard way. "You don't have to do this," I said out loud. The cabin didn't argue. I changed shirts anyway. Nothing fancy. Clean. Presentable. I checked my phone. No messages, no new numbers. Of course not. This wasn't my idea. At 1:30, I grabbed my keys and hesitated at the door. The wind rattled the trees outside, impatient. I locked up, stepped onto the gravel, and felt that familiar pull. Stay small, stay safe, stay alone. Then I pictured that lakeside smile again, and for reasons I didn't fully trust, I turned toward town.
Lakeview arrival, prank paranoia. Loon's Cabin Cafe sat right where the trees thinned and the lake took over, all windows and weathered logs, like it was trying to pretend it had always belonged there. The parking lot was half full, locals judging by the trucks, and the lake beyond it rolled in slow, steel-colored waves. I parked farther out than I needed to. Old habit, easier exits. I stayed in the truck longer than necessary, watching people come and go. Couples, mostly. A woman with a toddler on her hip. Two older men arguing gently over who forgot the bait. No one looking around like they were waiting for a punchline. Still, my shoulders stayed tight. I checked the time. 1:52. Early enough to leave without being rude, late enough to look like I tried. Inside, the cafe smelled like cinnamon and hot bread, the kind of smell that went straight for memory instead of reason. Wood floors creaked under boots. A chalkboard menu leaned crooked near the counter. I scanned the room once, then again. No one waved, no one stared too long. I chose a table near the window where I could see the lot and the lake both. The chair across from me stayed empty. I set my keys on the table, another old habit, and ordered coffee I didn't really want. Every time the door opened, my pulse ticked up. At 2:01, a group of college kids came in laughing too loudly. Not her. At 2:07, an older couple shuffled toward the counter, hands linked. Not her. At 2:11, nothing. I watched the steam curl off my mug and tried not to read meaning into it. The voice in my head ran through exits. If this was the joke, it was a soft one. Let me sit. Let me wonder. Let me feel foolish on my own. I checked my phone. Still nothing. 2:15. I leaned back in my chair and let out a breath through my nose. Of course, I muttered. This was exactly how it would go. No spectacle, no laughter, just absence. The kind that made you question why you'd agreed to begin with. I stood, jacket half on, already writing the apology text I'd never send. That was when the door opened again. She didn't rush in, didn't scan the room in panic. She stepped inside like she had nowhere else she needed to be, brushing rain from her coat, even though the sky outside hadn't decided to fall yet. Dark hair pulled back loose, simple sweater, boots worn, not styled. Her eyes lifted, calm and searching, and when they met mine, something in my chest shifted, not sharp, not loud, just settled, like weather changing without asking permission. She smiled, small and unsure, and walked toward me. I forgot the exits. Elise walks in like calm weather. She stopped a few feet from the table, close enough that I could see the faint pink in her cheeks from the cold. "Harley?" she asked. Her voice was steady, not rehearsed, not apologetic. "That's me," I said, surprised at how normal my own voice sounded. "I'm Elise. I'm sorry I'm late. My sister's dog decided the trash was a personal challenge." I waited for the rest of it, the laugh track, the reveal. None came. "You're fine," I said. "I was early." She smiled again and set her bag down, careful, like she didn't want to crowd the space. "I always am too. Today just didn't agree with me." She ordered tea, then turned back toward me, hands folded loosely on the table. No phone, no scanning the room, just attention. It threw me. "So," she said, tilting her head slightly, "Jonah and Mark said you build things." I felt a flicker of irritation and relief that my friends had at least told the truth about something. I try not to ruin them, I said. That earned a real smile, softer, warmer. I like people who make things with their hands, she said. It feels honest. The word landed heavier than it should have. We talked the way people do when neither of them is trying to impress, about the lake, about why fall made everything feel sharper, about how strange it was to be visiting somewhere beautiful without belonging to it. She didn't pry, I didn't deflect. When there were pauses, they stayed comfortable instead of panicked. I noticed things without trying to, the way she listened with her whole face, the scar near her wrist she didn't hide but didn't explain, the way her shoulders stayed relaxed, like she wasn't bracing for disappointment. At some point, I realized I wasn't waiting for the punchline anymore. "So how do you know them?" she asked, nodding toward the door like my friends might burst through at any second. "Long story," I said. She didn't push, just nodded. I like long stories, when people tell them on their own time. The hour passed without either of us checking the clock. When it ended, it didn't feel like escape. It felt like interruption. Outside, the lake had gone darker, the wind gentler. We stood near our cars, hands tucked into pockets, the air between us unfinished. "This was nice," she said. Not hopeful, just factual. "Yeah," I said, "it was." She hesitated, then laughed quietly. "I don't have your number, and I'm realizing that's usually how this part goes." I reached for my phone, then stopped. "I'd like to see you again," I said instead. Her smile held. "Good, me too." We traded numbers without ceremony, no promises, no jokes. She waved once as she pulled away, and I stood there longer than I meant to, watching her taillights disappear. For the first time in years, the quiet that followed didn't feel like retreat.
Quiet days, first choices. 2 days passed without a word. I didn't read into it at first. People had lives. Visits ended, momentum faded. I went back to my routines. Workshop mornings, quiet lunches, evenings where the lake went dark early and the cabin filled with shadow. Still, I caught myself listening for my phone. On the second night, rain came in sideways, tapping the windows like it wanted permission. I was oiling a table leg when my phone buzzed on the bench. Unknown number. "This is Elise. I wasn't sure if you were the kind of person who texts first. I hoped you were." I stared at the screen longer than necessary. "I can be," I wrote back, "if it's worth it." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, returned. "There's a trail by the lake my sister showed me, if you're free tomorrow." I was. We walked instead of talking much at first. The path ran close to the water, slick with fallen needles. She had a dog with her, a calm, gray-muzzled mutt that moved like it trusted the world. She said his name was August. "He chooses people," she said, watching him drift toward me. He did. I knelt, scratched behind his ears, felt something in my chest loosen without asking permission. "That usually takes a while," she said. "Guess I got lucky." She smiled, but there was thought behind it. We started meeting like that, small, steady. Coffee turned into shared bread in the grocery aisle. Walks turned into quiet dinners where no one performed. I didn't explain my past. She didn't offer hers. We let presence do the work. Until one afternoon, the past stepped out of an aisle labeled baked goods. Mark froze when he saw us together. His smile faltered. Elise noticed. "Friend?" she asked gently. "My brother," I corrected, voice even. Something passed between Mark and me, old weight, unresolved. He opened his mouth, then shut it. Elise rested her hand lightly against my arm, not possessive, anchoring. That night, rain trapped us at the cabin. She watched me move through the space like it mattered. I told her why I'd left town once, why silence had been safer than fighting men who confused power with truth. She listened, didn't flinch. When I kissed her, it wasn't urgent. It was careful, chosen. And in that quiet moment, I understood something clearly for the first time. Whatever came next, family, truth, reckoning, I wouldn't face it alone.
The return and what remains. I didn't plan to go back to town. It happened the way real things do, quietly, after enough time had passed that fear stopped being loud. Elise never pushed. She just stayed, walked beside me, let the truth surface when it was ready. What she didn't know at first was that my absence hadn't been a retreat. It had been preparation. When my father died, the town boss, who'd controlled more land than he ever worked, moved fast. Paperwork changed hands. Promises were whispered. My brother stood beside him, choosing safety over blood, influence over honesty. I left instead of bleeding myself dry against a system already decided. But time has a way of loosening lies. The claim I filed wasn't dramatic. No courtroom shouting, no threats. Just records, deeds, dates that didn't line up. Truth laid flat where it couldn't be ignored. When I returned, people looked twice. Some looked away. The final confrontation happened in a municipal office with bad lighting and a tired clerk. No raised voices, no weapons, just my brother's face when he realized I wasn't there to argue. I was there to finish it. The land came back to me. Not because I demanded it, because it had always been mine. Afterward, I walked out into the cold with Elise beside me, her hand steady in mine. The lake was calm that day, stretched wide and honest. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded and meant it. Revenge didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure, like setting something down that I'd been carrying too long. We went back to the cabin, not to hide, but to build. A life that didn't require approval, a love that didn't need noise to prove itself. I learned something late, but I learned it clean. The people who betray you count on your silence. The people who love you don't rush your voice, they wait for it. And sometimes the greatest act of defiance isn't fighting back. It's choosing who gets to walk beside you when the truth finally comes due.